Are you crazy?
Well, today's topics, we have some very interesting things to talk about. First off, our list is MAID in Canada. And this is not a Hollywood rom-com starring Jennifer Lopez and whoever her leading man is. This is about medical assistance in dying. And Canada is getting the, I guess, ire of the rest of the world because of this. We're going to dig into that in a little bit. We're also going to talk about the Twitter files. What an explosive issue. The Elon Musk saga of what is going on behind the scenes on Twitter is definitely the talk of the town. And like you mentioned, Clement, last but not the least, we're going to be hitting up on the social credit system, climate lockdowns, which is very concerning. It really should concern everyone. We're not trying to fear monger, but it's about just waking up and knowing what's going on. And, digital passports, which I'm very iffy about, and the whole cashless society that's being, I guess, forced on us. Well, what do you guys think?
Yeah,
Decided
absolutely.
to dig into it.
Let's dig right into it. Let's go into the noteworthy news this week that we've compiled. Insider reports that Sam Bankman-Fried was arrested in the Bahamas a day before his testimony to Congress on FTX. In a Twitter Spaces interview with Unusual Whales, he said he would call in to testify because of difficulty moving around and fears of the paparazzi. They actually heard him clicking in the background on the Twitter Space. And when asked if he was playing a game, he said, yeah, he's playing a computer game. This guy is just completely nuts. And I think it shows you what happens when a really young, single male gets put in a bubble with billions of dollars. I'm not sure if we've seen that before. I think this is the first time we've seen this kind of thing. And the behavior, I don't know about you, but it just reeks of narcissism to me. And he seems to feel like he can say anything he wants to the government after losing billions of dollars of user funds. So I find the whole thing absolutely atrocious and terrible. So apparently he's been arrested day before he was going to testify. Nobody really understands how it could be such a coincidence that it would happen the day before, given that this has been going on for months. So I don't know about you guys, but that just seems a bit weird.
Well, it is very fishy to me. I think the timing is really key here. This is not the first time we have seen choreographed moves like this. And people are like, oh, it's so coincidental. Is it really? How many more instances in the news have we wondered, oh, is it a coincidence? Someone getting arrested, someone being suicided or unalived all of a sudden, and yet no list popping out. So there really needs to be more of an accountability when it comes to huge issues like this. Had that been someone else, they're going to be following where that money went. Accountability would have been asked of him, but apparently that he's getting off with a slap on the wrist, I would say.
I'm happy that he got arrested finally. I think he kind of sat there comfortably in the Bahamas for a little too long while everyone was trying to interview him and invite him to their expo or to their conference or to Capitol Hill, cheering him in some instances as well. Like cheering this guy on for being so brave and so tough amid difficult time. And I'm like, this guy should be locked up. He mishandled billions of dollars in customer funds, whether it's intentional or not, it's still illegal. And then finally, the FBI brought like 8 charges against him for nearly 135 years in prison, which he'll be facing in court. A lot of those will be very hard for him to refute. So I'm glad that that's getting wrapped up. It's terrible for the industry too, unfortunately, for blockchain and crypto. But I do think in the end, the ability for them to track those funds and know where the money actually went and what he did with it, as well as the customer funds, some of the stolen funds, will be a big highlight for the technology going forward too. So there will be some positive things I think do come out of this. But at the moment, sigh of relief that he's finally, in custody, and maybe we'll get some justice.
The Kermit voice really gets me.
Yeah, that crazy, I've been having sex with 6 people in Bahamas hairstyle gets me every time.
The sex ring with his employees.
Oh my gosh. Ugh.
We have no idea what's going on down there. We don't want to imagine what's going on down there.
No, we do
Oh my
not.
gosh. Speaking of funds, Jerome Powell of the Federal Reserve claims that the U.S. he thinks the U.S. isn't in a recession. Unbelievable that they're going to this length to try to gaslight everybody into, not making a stand for the incredible price hikes that their policies have created.
No, I think I remember hearing that Washington Post had an article about, or was it the New York Times, saying, we might be in a recession and why that is a good thing. So
right. Yeah.
They're saying that it's a sign of progress, supposedly.
There's no progress. It's absolute bullshit. I'm sorry. Are we cussing on this show? I can't remember.
Oh, yeah,
but
I think we did I think you guys did last week. I think we're okay with it.
We'll keep it light. But no, it's terrible that they act like we're not in a recession here in the U.S. and that's not the case when the dollar is super, super strong versus every other currency, which kills us in trade. For one. Two, unemployment numbers haven't budged. Job numbers haven't budged. Inflation is not even really slowing down, especially core inflation. They had to raise rates again in December.
They raised rates yesterday, 0.5% again.
They've been raising it all year long. No real sign of a slowdown. The Fed has not given a lot of clarity on the future of the economy going into next year. So it's hurting the market. The S&P was down yesterday, and today I think it's almost in total like 600 points already. So markets aren't doing too well, struggling with that news. And it's the lack of clarity coming from the Federal Reserve in the U.S. that I think is really hurtful right now, because it's just 1 month after the other, raising rates, but not really getting a hold on inflation. So concerning times we're living in. Hopefully 2023 will be better. So fingers crossed.
Yeah. Let's wish.
Just nobody say, how much worse could it get? Because that is the jinx.
Yeah. Do you think so? All right. Here's a video of the Washington Post that we saw I saw on Twitter.
It's not a grievance session. You just
ask the question. Brad, you talked about positions getting eliminated. What are you going to do to protect people's jobs? Are they going to be treated like the magazine staffers were?
We'll have more information as we move forward. Thank you very much.
And how will you decided?
You seem to be just.
All right. So basically what you just saw there was the Washington Post employees getting livid about massive layoffs that have been announced because of a drop in subscribers. Actually, to the tune of 500,000 subscribers have been lost over the last, I don't know how long, I think it's a year. But it's kind of like, I don't know. I mean, I don't ever like to see anyone lose their job. But recently, journalists just haven't been, having a good reputation. And it's because they're pretty much following the woke agenda. So I'm not really sure whether to rejoice or feel bad for them.
It's definitely tough when there's no accountability anywhere, really. They are just bending to whatever the narrative is. And obviously they are in someone's pockets, because otherwise we would be hearing more of the truth instead of a one-sided narrative.
The job layoffs are sad. I mean, there's no way around that. You never want to see that happen. But this is what happens in a free market when you do something that the target market, your customer doesn't like, and you shift a narrative so much to one direction, or you try and control a narrative, or you put out false information, whatever it may be, like, they have been doing for quite a while now, you're going to lose subscribers. They're going to get tired of it. It's going to get annoying, and it's going to hurt your bottom line. And thus the effect of that is you're going to have layoffs. You're not going to be able to afford having all those people on staff. So, the real problem is the people that sit on that board that pull the strings and make decisions on what gets published and what goes out there. That's what these employees should be the most mad about. And something, needs to change in that regard, or this stuff will just keep happening. The market's going to shake out, these companies that are acting on their own ambitions at this point.
Yeah, I like what you said about the free market. And I think respectable journalism really did die quite a long time ago. It's just that no one really noticed it because we weren't dealing with pandemics and, everything all at once, let's say. So I think people are moving in mass migration to more alternative streams of media than the mainstream. And what we're seeing in Twitter, for example, after the takeover from Elon Musk, and also here, is that there's almost this entitlement that their job is not based on merit, it's based on equality. And that's a very socialist kind of mindset to have. So it's interesting to see this new ideology that's being pushed by the woke left actually coming back to bite them in the butt. So that's what I'll say about that. The Guardian reports that Jair Bolsonaro supporters tried to storm a, let's see if I can find here it is. Bolsonaro tried to storm police headquarters in a January 6th style rampage, and that cars and buses were torched following the ratification of Lula's election victory. So Lula is the left-wing communist ex-president of Brazil who was previously incarcerated for being what many believe was the main perpetrator in the largest ever kind of embezzlement in Brazilian history, corruption scandal, let's say. And this guy apparently has won by completely fair means the recent Brazilian election, even though almost the entire country, as far as I could see from video footage, and also I was in Miami recently and I saw tons. I mean, I'm talking about hundreds and hundreds of Brazilians protesting on Long Beach about this communist ex-president coming back. So this is just pure gaslighting again by the media, and no media, I think respectable media outlet is even touching this story. The news that I'm finding, I have to really search for, but it's out there, and they are angry and they are rioting but I'm just not so sure about who the government agency players are and who the actual real, kind of protesters are, because, and I don't want to dive too much into this because I know this episode isn't about this, but it wouldn't be the first time that riots have been instigated by, agents who are undercover. I'll just say that.
Oh, yes. And that's all I'll say about that, too.
We don't want to get canceled again.
No, not again. Thrown in FB jail.
All I'll say is that this isn't the first time it's happened in Brazil. They have a huge corruption issue at the government level there that the people are very, very fed up with. It's been going on for a long time. And I've seen so many raw video come out, especially on social media, of not just thousands, not tens of thousands, not even hundreds of thousands, but 1 million plus people being out in the streets in a city protesting the government. Something's very wrong there. And that's all I'll say about it for now, because there's nothing we can really do. But just, I think we should, be blessed a little bit that we're not in a situation maybe that Brazil's in. Like in the US. I mean, we have issues with the elections. We have issues politically, issues with government, but at least it's not at that level of chaos in a major world economy like it is in Brazil. And the fact that they're not covering it, it's probably a bias. It's probably a media bias. That's probably why.
Yeah.
And I think that is what, I guess makes people feel conflicted about these, I guess, mass firings when it comes to people who work in the, journalism industry, news industry. Like, remember when CNN had their new CEO step in and there was some massive restructuring, there was mass firing and a lot of people were let go. And he's basically calling more accountability from the people who do work in that network, because they're saying, we want to build credibility back. Like, people have already known CNN to represent something in the same way that the other side will say, well, Fox is this. And it shouldn't be that way. If you're a news source, be a news source. Don't be a news source for one side. Back in the day when, journalism started, it was an honor for you to reveal the truth. It was worth risking your life to talk about the things that people didn't know was going on. But now it seems like, okay, who's willing to pay more for me to say what they want me to say or bury what they don't want to be found out by people? So it's possible that people have less empathy for the people getting laid off if they know that, well, you're kind of part of the misinformation machine. So I've got no sympathy for you, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, it makes total sense to me. I'm 100% with you on that. We've got a whole lot of information about, maybe the reasons why the media isn't covering it, and we can go through that on another episode. But it goes really deep. So let's see if we can cover that on a future episode. So in other news, the Daily Skeptic, which is an alternative resource on current events, reports on an open letter from concerned citizens of the United Kingdom to members of the British Parliament about the proposed World Health Organization Pandemic Prevention, Preparedness and Response Treaty, which threatens the sovereignty of nations that will sign it. And that's because it will expand the bureaucratic power of the World Health Organization outside of just healthcare. It's actually going to move into other areas like food production, urbanization and infrastructure, international travel and trade, activities that lead to biodiversity loss and climate change. And basically what that means is the World Health Organization is trying to get members to sign a treaty so that in the event of a pandemic, they can take control or at least guide those countries by the rule of law, by the way. So there's no way out of this once it gets signed, unless, obviously, that people will be restricted in many ways across all those things that I just said. Now, if that doesn't sound dystopian and Orwellian to you, I don't know where you've been living for the last 10 years, 20 years. So this is really coming to a head, I think. I can feel that there's going to be a backlash, and there already is. A lot of people are already standing up for this, scientists, politicians, economists, just everyday people like ourselves, standing up and starting to speak about it. So, I don't know what you guys think about the World Health Organization at the moment, but it just feels so evil empire-ish.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I'm with you on that. And it just reeks of control is what it is. And I remember seeing a video of Joe Biden saying, well, we have to be prepared for the next pandemic. There's going to be another one. And they've trained people so well over these past 3 years that people don't even question. Some people don't even question that. They're like, oh, there's going to be another one. We should be ready. Meanwhile, those who are awake are saying, oh, so you're confessing that you've already planned for another one, so we got to buckle down. And it's just reached levels of crazy that we never thought we would see in our lifetime.
Yeah, I think it's another organization going for a power grab right now. I think they got overly empowered and emboldened in 2020 going forward because of the global pandemic with COVID. And I think they're trying to seize the opportunity on the end tail here of this pandemic to get people to come to the table and sign an agreement, pen to paper, that gives them power the next time this happens. And I guarantee you it will happen again. It's not the first time we've had pandemics. It's not the first time we've had massive outbreaks like this. And honestly, personally, I think some of these things are human manufactured that aren't natural too. There's a lot of things being done in the laboratory, a lot of things that can go wrong country to country. I think it's inevitable to happen again. So I think for them, this just gives them a foothold and a bit more control and a bit more ways to make money if they come across us again in the future.
Yeah. I mean, I was going to go through more news from this week, but I think we're kind of moving into the episode quite a lot now. So let's maybe go to the first topic. What do you think? Should we do the climate lockdowns first, or do you want to start with something else?
We could start with the MAID issue in Canada, the medical assistance in dying, because I feel like that's really alarming to me. I think that anytime you are trying to sell the idea of how medically assisted death is a beautiful thing and a profound thing is just, again, also another form of gaslighting. So this actually became a legal procedure in 2016 in Canada, but it was first offered to people who have terminal illnesses like cancer. And in 2021, they amended it to include those with non-terminal physical conditions like chronic pain, because there just seemed to be no cure for it. They were considering adding mental health patients to that, or mental illness rather. But then they said, let's hold off on that. Let's talk about that a little bit more. We need safeguards. We need an expert panel to give us the guidelines on what to do about that. So Canada has now, raised eyebrows all across the world, because there are advertisements out there now that talk about, it's got like peaceful music in the background and like death is beautiful, death is this. Well, really, when you think about it, it's telling people that if life is so hard for you, why not just unalive yourself, So this whole news of medically assisted death, they have now included physical disorders. Yeah, like we mentioned earlier, it was for people with terminal illnesses. But now this is including so many more issues that, health issues. The latest Health Canada report shows that there's been a steady increase over the past 6 years. They're looking at 3.3% of deaths as being from medically assisted death. And that's
insane.
That's insane. That's huge. It's coming close to the European average of 4% of all deaths being medically, or being assisted deaths. And so how it happens is someone has to request it, right? For example, I'm done with life. It's so hard. I request it. I have to sign it with an independent witness. And then 2 independent practitioners have to confirm that I'm eligible for this service and that everything has been met. All the boxes have been ticked. And then they give you 90 days, which is about 3 months, to assess, the request. And then you're going to be told to go to counseling, basically exhaust all efforts to withdraw consent of, assistance in dying. They're saying after 90 days, we wash our hands off this. We've given you every opportunity to change your mind, but you didn't. So now we're going to, you have until the point of when it's supposed to be, no pun intended, executed. That action or request is supposed to be executed. So in Canada, 17 medical schools, the lead or the heads of their psychiatric departments, all issued a statement saying, we need to hold off on this. Give us until mid-March to discuss this, because we have to institute safeguards. We have to have information for people to go to, websites that will give people more information and education and knowledge on what this really entails and what it's about. I think they're basically just trying to say, this informed consent. This is really you as an adult saying, yes, I want this for my life. However, this reminds me of a story of a of an Olympic veteran who is in a wheelchair. She's a paraplegic, and she was requesting for help. This is an American Olympian who was asking for help to install a stair lift in her home because, obviously she can't get up. And for years she has waited, and they said to her, we can't help you with that. We don't have the funds or the finances. However, we can help you with assisted death. So they're telling this multi-awarded Olympian, if life is too hard and you can't get up your stairs and we can't give you the money for a stair lift, how about we help you die? Jeez. So where's the humanity in that? Right?
Yeah,
and so
it's ridiculous. It's like, you know what I've noticed? I've noticed that there seems to be this nonchalant kind of carefree behavior when it comes to many things that before, as a group, as a whole, we would have said, no, we're not touching that. We're not going to go there because we know what might happen if we do. That's kind of sacred. That's, that's untouchable, right? And it's kind of like an unwritten rule. That could be said about, suicide or helping people kill themselves because you just don't know, right? How could you know? And it is a slippery slope. That could be said about gene manipulation or gene engineering. And we've gone there too, cloning, all that kind of just God, playing with God, right? Stuff. We seem to just take it so unseriously these days. And it's concerning so much, this MAID situation. It came out of left field. I don't know how it got so much traction so quickly. It kind of makes you think, what really could be the reason for it? Or is it really just a woke movement gone out of control But you know how they really are talking about depopulation, in these World Economic Forum meetings and other, people have been on record talking about depopulation. It kind of helps a little bit with that cause, I would say.
Yep. Go ahead.
Yeah, just a quick note on it, because I feel like personally for me, this is a conflicting one, because I think it really depends on the situation. One, I don't think they should be advertising it. I think that's a really bad thing to do, because the next step is going to be, oh, you can't afford to pay off your credit card debt or pay off your student loan. Why don't you just kill yourself? I mean, eventually it'll be so easy to just give that as an option to people. And it's probably the Chinese, they have so much control over Canada. They're probably just laughing that we're getting ourselves to off each other for the stupidest reasons. But there's reasons that aren't stupid too. This is where I get conflicted, because depending on the situation, and I have a lot of people in my life too that have dealt with really serious illnesses and disabilities, and it's hard for them, and they would prefer an option out. And while I don't think this should be advertised, there are a lot of people that are struggling, that are tired, that want to be at peace, that don't want to go through that everyday struggle in life. It's not having arms and limbs, not being healthy, fighting death every single day, years on years, never knowing that you're not going to have a full or complete life, or having a disability that always holds you back from doing things that maybe you dream of doing. For some people, and there's a decent amount of them out there, I feel like they deserve to have that option without being ridiculed either. So that's where the personal conflict for me comes in. Again, it shouldn't be advertised. It shouldn't be advertised to people that can get themselves out of situations, or that aren't really having that much of a struggle in life. Yeah. But for some people, maybe that's where we have to have the talk.
Yeah,
You're
I don't think it should
absolutely
be advertised.
You hit the nail on the head there, Brandon, because especially since they're considering, mental illness to now be an eligible category for MAID. And isn't the goal for mental health to help people recover, to help them rise above their ailments and, whatever is making them feel like they've reached the end of their rope. But with them possibly including this as an eligible category for assisted death, it's just giving people a reason to get rid of more people. And, they are also giving suicidality a bigger place in people's minds. I mean, people with suicidal ideation, right, they can recover from that. And that should be our goal as a good society, is to make them think life is good. There's something good worth living for. Don't give up. Don't quit. And there have been amazing stories of people who have come out of that brain fog for years. But, with this current rate, by 2023 or 2024, the number of MAID recipients, in short, people who have, died due to assisted death, will be higher than the number of COVID deaths in any of the past 3 years.
The way that I look at it is, let's say, so the government's saying, you've got the new assisted death program, hugely controversial. What has the government been doing at the same time? Like, what's been going on with the government around this launch of this program? Have they been doing a good job? Do they really care about people? Have they shown that? Like, is that the track record they have? And if the answer is no, then you got to question this whole thing. Like, why are they advertising it? And again, come back to the point of people being able to have the option to take their lives. I think it should be available, but I don't think it should be visible at the front end. I don't think it should be an option on a phone call where you dial 5 to talk to someone about committing suicide. I think this is something you really have to fight to get to, because otherwise it will be abused. So whether it's the Chinese or whether it's just a woke ideological group in power pushing for this, I think it's wrong. I think it needs to be revised. And I think people need to be more aware of it and be careful, because like you said, Hillary, the more that this gets pushed out, the more that this gets promoted, the weaker the people are. They're going to start to think that this is actually a legitimate course for them, when in actual fact, there's no reason to do that.
Agreed.
Yeah. So I don't know if that covers your MAID segment.
Yeah. That's it. That's it for me.
So what's going on with the Twitter files. Then what we'll do is we'll move on to the Twitter files and leave the climate thing until the last. But things are starting to heat up. People were a bit worried that there was going to be no reveal with the first one coming out, and they were, big deal, right? There's been collusion. Okay, well, we knew that, but now it seems to be getting interesting. What's been going on?
Yeah, it's been really interesting to see since Elon took over Twitter how much of the political bias actually exists. I think we knew for a long time, but we never really wanted to admit that that was happening, or did we have any proof of it necessarily, until Elon started releasing his version of the X files called the Twitter files, the same drama minus the sci-fi, at least for now, where it's exposing so much of that political bias and how that is played into the shadow bannings that we've speculated on for so long, the way they go and determine policy, how much money they've been donating to political campaigns. I got a whole huge list of stuff. Maybe you can pull up some of those tweets too, so that maybe we can do a couple of comparisons. But the Twitter files were sent out to a couple of independent reporters by Elon and by Twitter so that they could be analyzed and published fairly. And just to kind of give some examples of how they would advocate or not advocate for certain things that would be on their criteria for being banned. They would look at tweets, for example, or not look at tweets put out by the Ayatollah, by ISIS, by terrorist groups, where they literally talk about genocide and eradicating an entire group of people off the planet. And we'll talk about murder. We'll talk about their hate for other groups of people. And that stuff exists still. It's still up there on Twitter, and they don't do anything about it. But what they're more concerned about personally is how things bump up against their political opinions. They put in way more of a fight against Trump, trying to get him removed from Twitter, than they have, trying to ban anyone that's doing anything bad these days, which is really sad. And some of these tweets are just examples of that and where they've put some of their priorities. And in this one, it mentions the Twitter employees organizing to demand that Trump be banned. And that's the next thing I'm going to get to, is how overwhelmingly biased the Twitter base was for Twitter, the employees. I sent you another one. Is there should be, that one. So in this one, it shows you the donations made in the last midterm elections by the employees at some of these major tech companies and which political leaning they had. Most of them leaned heavily Democrat. At Twitter specifically, it was almost 99% of employee donations that went to the Democratic Party, at a tune of $350,000 to only $3,000 to Republicans. So you can't say that there isn't a political bias within these tech organizations, especially with that Twitter. And this is some of the stuff that was disclosed in those Twitter files. Other things that were disclosed included our theories on shadow banning, which is real, but they use a different term for it. I don't remember what it was called exactly. Maybe one of you guys remember. But what they would do is they would pick accounts and they would list them with keywords that would either throttle them from amplification, throttle them from search results, that would block them from trending, that would put barriers to entry and how much they can grow. They did all these things to accounts that were heavily Republican based, that were, I guess, anti-liberal or anti-progressive or anti-democratic. Very few, if none, were placed on those that aligned with them politically in their viewpoints as well. Other things include the policy changes that they would make. The executives on the board, within days of even an election, they would make changes to the policy and how they would go about actually censoring and moderating influencers, politicians, public officials, to content and breaking news. And they'd make these changes all the time. And these include requests by the FBI to censor certain things on Twitter as well, which they complied with almost 100% of the time. And this begs the question, is Twitter more or less a publisher than they are a social media platform? Because if they are, and they're operating under the same protections of a social media platform, there's potential grounds for that to change, where they lose those protections and they could get sued in court. Either Twitter as the entity, past executives that worked there. There's going to be a lot of people that are aggrieved by this, when all the details come out. It also highlights, how much did they interfere in elections? How much did they interfere in the narratives that were being pushed out? If it was overwhelmingly that biased, like 99% to 1% is crazy. On top of that, Elon Musk can run a poll on Twitter. For example, should he unban Trump and give him his account back? And it's nearly split in the polling from the user base, which is about as democratic as it gets. And even slightly leaned towards him being given back his account. So when you compare the user base, which is actually fairly balanced on the platform, versus the people that actually run the platform, it's kind of scary because they're dictating so much of the narrative. And in a country where this is very important as well, and is at a very critical point in time where politics is very hot and decides a lot of things. I think social media platforms like Twitter have been given too much free reign and have been given too much power to do what they want. And I think overall, what's going to come out of these Twitter files is Elon Musk, and thank God he did this, is expose all this corruption behind the scenes. And that's going to force scrutiny on Facebook. It's going to force scrutiny on Google. It's going to force scrutiny on other companies that also try to control those narratives, as well as publishers like we talked about earlier, like New York Times, Washington Post. So this is going to be very fascinating. I would love to hear your guys' opinion on this as well. I know there's been like 6 or 7 document drops in like the last 2 weeks.
I mean, I personally have been quite happy with everything that they've been revealing. It's been something that we sorely needed at this point. You weren't going to get any other person or institution kind of sharing that and it getting out to the degree that the Twitter files have. So I think Elon Musk, and I remember Jordan Peterson saying in a recent interview that he thinks that Elon Musk could possibly have saved the country with this, because who else is talking about the corruption going on to that degree? I mean, it's all the things that you just said are incriminating. And if it does, hopefully, fingers crossed, get taken to court, we will see a shift in the power from this corrupt government and the institutions that are, supporting those governments. Klaus Schwab has talked about in the past being so proud of having his fingers of the World Economic Forum, puppeteering the leaders around the world. I mean, we need people like Elon Musk to do this. So I'm personally I guess I'm energized by the fact that someone of his stature is willing to go out against, such deep and powerful corruption. And he said before in his tweets, right? I don't feel like committing suicide, if I die. It was nice knowing you all. You can just imagine him saying it too in his weird mannerism way. He's such a good guy from what I can see. And a lot of people hate him. I think they just haven't really thought about it much. I don't think that they're giving all the facts their due place in when they're making a decision like that, because it just goes to show you can really see how brainwashed some people are compared to the more critical thinking people when you got someone as controversial as Elon Musk and all of the things that are being said about him in the news. So that's what I think about the Twitter files. Fingers crossed people go to jail. We need Fauci. He recently, I think was the last one that was published, he said his pronouns were prosecute Fauci. I just laughed out loud when I saw that, and I thought, this is it. This is what we've been pushing for. You know how I feel about Anthony Fauci. I think he needs to be taken to court. I think we need to really question him and get to the bottom of this.
Absolutely. I actually was glad that Brandon mentioned how this does put pressure on Mark Zuckerberg, because that's the next thing everyone's looking at. Like, well, now what, Meta? Now that Twitter is in hot water because of this, and Elon is, spearheading the charge on transparency and accountability, we all know that there are a lot of hands in the pockets when it comes to Facebook. Like, a lot of people are in talks with Zuck about what he should. I mean, I got thrown in Facebook jail for something that wasn't even political, and you're getting fact checked for things that are actually facts. So, like you said, we'll see. We'll have to wait and see how this affects all the other social media platforms in terms of their censorship.
Yeah. It's scary how politicized I think these social platforms are, when they're supposed to be, like, Twitter's supposed to be a town hall. Instagram is supposed to be a place where you can express yourself. And those aren't anymore, unfortunately. Once you start having any kind of opinion, belief, or political stance that isn't progressive, I'm not saying that progressive beliefs are bad, but if you don't take a progressive stance, should you be blocked and banned and throttled and have that taken away from you? That's where I think the line needs to get drawn. And there might need to be some kind of rule where they balance out the employment base so that it's not overwhelmingly progressive or not overwhelmingly conservative, because that affects users. And I think that's just going to be something that gets highlighted more and more, that is going to be an issue that's going to need to be solved.
Yeah. One last thing before we move on to the next. There seems to be a very subtle way that they're, suggesting this control is, how everyone's trying to earn money through their posts. Like, oh, you can earn money through making reels. But the problem is, in order for you to make bonuses out of those reels, you have to make sure that your account stays eligible. So I tried this out. I said, fine. It keeps prompting me like, hey, make money now, make bonuses. So I said, sure, I get some good views on my reels, I might as well give it a shot. And then I got a strike that said your account eligibility is at risk if you don't follow the guidelines on what should be posted. You don't only risk not getting to cash out your bonuses, but you also risk losing your account. So it's conditioning the people to now think, hey, if I want to keep earning money from what I post, then I better just post dumb stuff, fun stuff, and not any of the serious things that are concerning to people. And if I want to stay, in the social media atmosphere, or, keep my account from getting deleted, then I better behave and stay in my lane.
Yeah, I've got something interesting for you. I think I shared this with you in the Slack channel, Brandon. It was Patrick Bet David who did a video a couple of days ago. I think could have been this morning or a couple of days ago. And he basically mentioned how, if you, on TikTok, if you want to maintain your followers, if you want to keep your followers, then you're going to have to think quite twice about staying on TikTok. Because the thing is, he ran a test. I'm not going to go into this too much detail, but basically at the end of his test, he basically concluded that you only are able to maintain, just like Hillary said, the engagement and the visibility of your content if you're saying the right things. If you say anything against China, boom, immediately you get back. You get kind of like a shadow ban. So it was interesting. I might link that video actually in the description. Anyway, moving on to the last topic of the day. I think we've kind of done a good job so far of putting the news out there for people. Let's talk about climate lockdowns and social credit. They are coming to you whether you want them to or not. Last week, we touched on Oxford, which is a city in the UK, whose mayor has outwardly talked about having 15-minute cities, which are kind of would be broken up into 6 different parts, 6 different neighborhoods. And the aim would be to kind of curb traffic, curb pollution, they say. You wouldn't be able to travel between those segments. And that just by itself sounds Orwellian and kind of totalitarian, right? But they're coming. Climate lockdowns have also been threatened across the European Union. Kristen Tate, who's an author for The Hill, recently said in an article from February the 2nd this year, that most cities are going to begin a gradual and discrete ramp up of restrictions, which we're seeing. All the news kind of points towards, you're the problem. Okay, this is how we need to curb climate change together, right? You can't use your electricity to charge your electric cars in California. You can't heat your houses above 19 degrees in Switzerland. You're going to have to make some difficult choices as a consumer, which hurts a lot because the policies seem to be lacking on the other side for the large multinational corporations. So we are seeing these restrictions come into play, which kind of plays into what Kristen has said in her article. And, organizations like Cordis, which is an official resource for findings in the European Union, have basically said that hundreds of deaths were apparently avoided due to lower air pollution levels resulting from COVID lockdowns, which is kind of not something that you should be proud of, right? I mean, what about the hundreds of thousands of potentially millions of people around the globe that have perished or are suffering due to the collateral damage from these Orwellian policies? So we really have to put things into perspective here. I do believe this is another case of gaslighting from our mainstream media, which, we're seeing so much more of, and it's getting concerning now. It's almost getting to the point where you wonder if there's going to be any more democracy. We seem to have such a stranglehold from these organizations on our mainstream media and the narratives that they're pushing. So, missed medical appointments, mental health and suicide, job loss, and business closures. These are just some of the things that are contributing to, suicides, deaths, collateral damage, cost of living increases, unexpected knock-on effects from mandated health policies. I mean, what about those? We can't talk about those. We get censored. We get deplatformed if we even bring up the topic in a way that isn't allowed. So again, we're getting gaslighted from authority institutions and organizations on behalf of the ruling elite and the globalist classes. ESG, you might have heard of this before, environmental, social governance. That system kind of mirrors the Chinese social credit system in many ways. It grades organizations in line with a centralized set of rules. And it's been terribly, terribly ineffective. I mean, look at Sri Lanka, right? Sri Lanka was doing everything that they should have to meet the requirements of this environmental social governance policy. But since they did that, within 6 months, over 90% of Sri Lanka's farmers had used 6 months after, rice production fell 20%, and prices skyrocketed 50%. They had to import $450 million worth of rice, despite having been self-sufficient just months earlier. So you can see how this has really damaged countries that are trying to follow this policy. But, a lot of what drives the ESG movement is the incredible amount of investment that has gone into it from organizations like the largest in the world, BlackRock. As of December 2021, assets under sustainable funds like ESG funds amounted to more than $2.7 trillion. And if you think this is paving the way, rather, for a social credit system, then you're not wrong. Let's take a look at what Dr. Jordan Peterson said about impending social credit systems.
Do you think what we did during COVID could usher in our version of a social credit system?
Oh, yes, definitely. Yeah, that's highly probable.
And that it will be accepted by many people because, again, that
they won't even
yearning
notice.
for safety.
They won't notice even. Yeah. You can't believe how much people don't know these things. When I went to the UK, I talked to some people from the House of Lords. This is within the last 6 months. The most astute of the people sitting in the House of Lords had only become aware of the woke movement in the last 18 months. Oh, yes. You just can't believe how much this is not on people's radar. Not someone like you can't believe that at all because it's on your radar all the time. That's not, you live in a world that's on the cutting edge of this sort of thing. It's like people have no idea. It's like, well, why not have a digital passport? I mean, how convenient. It's like, fair enough. And you can understand that. wouldn't it be nice if we could pay for everything with our phones? It's like, wouldn't it be nice if the central government, who's woke-oriented and makes carbon dioxide remediation the priority, knows exactly what you spend on everything so they can target you tax-wise with precision? It's like, oh, didn't think about that. It's like, yeah, you sure didn't. And oh, yes, it's highly probable. It'll be a miracle if we escape from that. You can see these signs of this everywhere. You know, when you go through airports now, there's a lot of automated barriers. You show your passport. It's like, well, these are automated barriers. What if you can't go through them? Well, that's the situation for many people in China. It's like, what are you going to do? You're going to argue with the machine? Like, you just cannot imagine how screwed you are. And we're speeding towards that with an immense lack of care.
Yeah, so that was basically Jordan Peterson breaking down in a really, really effective way what it's going to mean for us if we let these social credit systems come in. And again, people think that they're so far away, because who would ever imagine in a Western civilization that they'd be tracked every single minute of every single day by their government, that they wouldn't be able to spend their money on certain things, that they'd be restricted from entering certain establishments or leaving the country even. I mean, this is terrible Orwellian stuff. We need to be completely aware of what the risks are and what the chances of this being implemented are. We need to be aware of their tactics for doing so. And it seems to be working at this point. That's why it's such a, I guess, a pessimistic view from Dr. Peterson. But I do think that there are people now starting to voice at least an opposition to this in politics, in economics and sciences. We're seeing people like Christine Anderson, who's a member of the European Parliament, Danielle Smith of Alberta, Canada. She's also said she doesn't want anything to do with the WEF. Ron DeSantis, obviously, who hasn't, I don't think he's ever mentioned the WEF, but I think his policies are pretty much in line with the people I'm mentioning right now. And Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who's completely against anything like this, and who also wrote a book about the real Dr. Fauci, which I recommend that you read, or there's a movie that was made about it that recently and that you can watch online for free. Scientists like Robert Malone, who helped create the mRNA vaccine technology, speaks out about the use of it in these pandemics. In the COVID pandemic specifically, but they've also recently, I don't know if you know this, rather revealed that there's a flu jab that they're working on, which I'm sure they've got done already, which is an mRNA vaccine, despite all of the crazy stuff going on with the current one. Carrie Mullis, just to mention one person, who was the creator of the PCR test, died in August 2019, just before this whole thing started, you know, with COVID. So I don't know what to say about that, but people are speaking out about it. There will be martyrs. There have been martyrs. You know, the future doesn't look bright right now, but there is light at the end of the tunnel. And I think if we do come together and we keep sharing this, we keep talking about it, we stand a chance of coming out of it with our liberties and our freedoms intact.
Absolutely. And this is now more than ever is the time for fearless discussion.
Yeah, I agree.
I think this stuff is, you know, it's all very scary, and I have very strong opinions on it, but I'm going to try and be objective on this a little bit, just for the sake of things, because I think that this technology, some of it can be very useful if it's put in the right hands or if it's not overly centralized, even down to a social credit system. It's something that frightens me tremendously because it just doesn't work, and I don't want to end up living in a society like they have in China right now, where they have complete control of your daily life for good or bad. And they give you, you know, golden stars or red X's, you know, depending on how you are in public and what you do. But there are some instances where maybe this could make sense, you know, just kind of a thought experiment for this one. For example, how many times in the US have you had to tip somebody for something, even if you felt like they didn't deserve a tip?
All the time, almost all the time.
Exactly. So, and that adds up too. It's a lot of money. It's like $2 here, $3 there, $5 there, $7 for that dinner. It adds up for a lot of people. What if there was like some kind of social credit system that wasn't detrimental to you, but that could only add value to your life? So if you were the kind of person that was always out tipping people, could that be reflected in your credit card statement as a credit? Like, is there little things that could be done maybe with a system like that that could benefit people, that wouldn't put that fear in mind for them, that would benefit the economy and force you to actually want to spend money? I think there's some good use cases potentially. Digital passports is another one, or digital identities could be very helpful for efficiency and moving lines along and helping businesses make more money, helping with port of entry, verifying who people are. But at the same time, you don't want it all centralized in one place where anyone with bad actor type of authority could access it. You know, maybe this is where blockchain comes in. Maybe this is where we integrate some decentralization aspects. So I think a lot of these things we talk about and we hear about, they're scary, and for good reason. It's going to come down to how they're implemented. And I think a lot of people should think about it not from the guise of this is scary and bad, but how could we apply it to make society so much better for everyone and for ourselves? So that's the objective takeaway that I'm going to kind of lend to this, since I usually just bat back and say, no, this is shit. We don't want any of this. We don't want CBDCs. We don't want
no, and that's
social
good.
credit.
And that's what we need that. We need that aspect of the argument too. And I agree with you on those points. If you can trust the organization that is implementing the technology, then the technology does actually make, or should make, your life a lot easier. That obviously the problem here is that we cannot trust the centralized government of, I would say, almost any nation right now to be able to do the right thing and uphold the freedoms and the liberties of the people and the privacy, let's say, and not take that for granted and not fall into the trap of greed and power hungry, narcissism. So that's the challenge. Take money for an example. I would much rather use inefficient paper money and metal money to transact than to allow a government and a central bank to make my life easier by giving me a digital wallet. I would rather use a decentralized currency if they allow that to survive, if they allow that to be used, like Bitcoin. That's what I would prefer. We have to be, I think, optimistic, but I think we also should be. And I know this is what you're saying too. We need to be smart about the power that we give away. So, yeah.
I think it's hard to be optimistic given what we've seen happen in just this year. There's so many things that were done in bad faith, and like Brandon mentioned, bad actors too. So I'm not sure people are very keen on handing over any more control and any more access into their personal lives, from buying medicine for your children to, for example, if I wanted to buy raw milk, which is really, villainized and demonized in the industry, are they going to prevent me from doing that? Are they going to give me a bad social credit because, she buys raw milk? Like, how dare she buy raw milk and support these local farmers? So then I'm screwed. And the reason that I'm not really for more control for them is because, well, show me a good guy who'll do it first, right? That's why Elon Musk is like a unicorn for us. It's like, oh my gosh, he actually went and did that. That should be the standard. Our standard should be that we are trying to be a good society. The bad people are supposed to be the exception and not the rule, but now it's the other way around. There's just bad people everywhere, and good people are suddenly brave and stunning. So we're in the upside down world.
We are in the upside down. It feels like it. It's hard to be optimistic right now, especially after this year, and I guess the past couple of years that have gone by. But it's essential. When we have this technology and we're on the fringe of implementing it, if we lack the optimism to apply it in all the right ways and to push for it and to fight for it, then it will only be implemented in the wrong ways. So we have to find ways to be optimistic, as hard as it is.
Yeah. Having said that, if you support what we're doing, which is exactly what Brandon just said, then like this video, please, and subscribe. We're going to keep doing these. Share your thoughts with us in the comments. Share this with your friends. Share it with anyone who you think should see it. And we'll see you on the next one.